Good afternoon. I'm Clive Bleasdale from Waitmans. I'm a partner with Waitmans, and I'm a development lawyer as such, but I deal with a lot of transactional work, projects, and disposals of properties and portfolios. Today I'm joined by Tony O'Keefe from LM6. He's a director of LM6 who specialises in property disposal work. Good afternoon, Tony. Are you okay?
Great, thank you, Clive. Good afternoon. Thanks for having me. Just before we start, just to introduce myself, like I said, Tony O'Keefe, director of LM6. We are commercial property agents based in Liverpool, but we cover the northwest and indeed the north. Principally, we're involved in industrial agency, and hopefully we can shed some light on where we're up to at the present time, Clive, in the market.
Yeah, well, that would be great. I mean, that's what I wanted to try and do, to get some perspective from your side of the business and how things are going for you in terms of the present market. How's it looking at the moment?
Well, at the minute, unlike other sectors in the commercial property world, industrial is holding up really well, and there's a real positive story out there. I mean, it's no shock to anybody that, you know, the UK has just seen its largest annual drop in GDP over recent months, you know, all exclusively down to COVID. But like I say, the industrial sector has shown resilience in both the investment and the occupational market. Depending on who you talk to across the industrial world, from a UK perspective, you know, our competitor research, if you like, Amazon Young, if you want, they're showing the grade A take-up for the half years of 15 million square feet. That's up 33% on the 5-year average, and 55% up on the same period last year. Now, if you want to use someone else's research as well, have a look at Savills. They look at units over 100,000 square foot. They've had the best, or shown the best half-year figures ever shown at 22.4 million square foot. That's 38% up on 2019, and 66% up on the long-term average. So that's across the UK for all take-up in industrial. So really, really positive.
Yeah, so it's by no means a gloom and doom scenario, just the opposite. But that's driven particularly by the market you're operating in, then, really, is what you're saying there, Tony.
Yeah, and that's a UK perspective. But if we drill down and look at the northwest, specifically on industrial take-up, if you look at, say, units over 100,000 square foot, you know, take up 2.6 million square foot, 12 deals, and that's for the half year from January up to the summer there. So that's 2.6 million for the half year. Long-term average, you're kind of looking at 4 million square foot. Yeah. So we're well on the way to have a really good year. To put that into perspective, that's up 128% on last year. Again, this is for the northwest. I mean, last year was a strange year for one reason or another, with Brexit and elections and all that kind of shenanigans. But even 2008, which was previously the best year on record, take-up was at 5 million square foot there. So we're still online to beat that. So, you know, what I appreciate in some sectors of the property world, they're finding it very difficult. Industrial is flying at the minute.
Yeah. I mean, there's obviously still a number of uncertainties out there for the economy and the nation generally, but in terms of the e-commerce boom, then it's really carrying on a pace and perhaps accelerated by the present circumstances, then, I think, is what you're really saying.
It is, absolutely, but we can come back to the kind of e-commerce later, but it's not exclusively e-commerce. I mean, people have still got to eat, and the biggest deal of this year was actually to Kellogg's in Haydock. You know, they took 500,000 square feet there. So, but yeah, e-commerce, absolutely massive story. if you look across the UK, 36% of take up this year was by Amazon,
Right.
which is,
Right.
an amazing stat. Um,
Do you think it helps that your business focuses purely on the areas that you've been discussing, really? So effectively, can I describe you as a niche business in that respect, or is that
a shed head, Clive. Is that what you're trying to say?
your words, not mine, Tony? Your words, not mine.
We are. We're principally industrial, and it's a nice place to be at the minute. Like I say, on the big box side, that's going great guns, but also on the smaller multi-let industrials as well,
Yeah.
which is a huge sector of our business as LM6. Covering the smaller market. Sub 50,000 square feet. Now, everyone
Yeah.
seems to love talking about, big boxes, but multi-let industrial, again, really strong, holding up really well. Traditionally been seen as being buffered, as insulated in tough times, because of the varied sectors involved on industrial estates. You've got manufacturers, production guys, engineers, distribution. It's a really broad church.
Yeah, and interest from obviously the institutional side as well as the more trading occupational side as well. Then, I mean, both sides of that particular coin, really. It's not just the occupiers; it's the institutions as well. From your perspective.
Yes, we're seeing quite a weight of money coming into the industrial world. That was again, it's just coming out of those sectors which are finding it particularly difficult at the minute, and into the industrial world.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. Are there any particular barriers to progress, do you think, or is the sky the limit at the moment? From what you said.
Well, one of the issues is availability of both land for new development, for those big box battleships, if you like, but also on the smaller side of the multi-lets, kind of sub 15,000 square foot. There's been very, very little new development on that side, which is a real issue for occupiers across the region.
Yeah.
So we're seeing new developments on the big side. We're seeing new developments on the mid-range units. 30,000 to 70,000 square foot. Network Space are having a good run with that on two of their schemes at the minute. It's Mere Grange, St Helens, and Element in Knowsley, where they're landing deals to Wayfair, Amazon at 30,000 square foot. But there's nothing being built for the smaller occupier.
Yeah.
I mean, that's an issue of lack of land, rising build costs, and just the cost efficiencies of building smaller units. They're too expensive.
Yeah, yeah.
But people are stepping into that gap, though, propcos, to refurbish accommodation, which is quite interesting. And again, locally, Glenbrook are undertaking a couple of schemes in Bootle and the Wirral, taking older kind of legacy industrial accommodation and putting in a comprehensive refurbishment program, reletting it and selling it. So
yeah. You've got a fair bit of that space on your doorstep there in Knowsley and Kirby, haven't you? Really, I suppose.
We have. I mean, that's principally why we've based ourselves here. We're industrial agents. We deal with industrial occupiers. So there's no point in us being in a city centre office. We're on the ground with our market, and yes, and void rates here on locally, well, across the northwest are very low, but particularly so in Knowsley and Liverpool. There's practically no space available for occupiers.
Is there a planning problem, do you think, with regard to new build in a sense, or redevelopment and refurbishment of existing units? I suppose if they're existing units, it's not such a big problem, but the rebuild may be more of a challenge, perhaps?
Well, I think historically local authorities thought of industrial as, you know, a dirty sector. Specifically, you know, there was a real concentration on manufacturing uses in terms of jobs and what have you. And logistics was seen as, well, it's a couple of guys with a wagon moving boxes. But if this lockdown has shown anything, it's how important the logistics industry and sector is to UK PLC to keep the show on the road. And logistics has really stepped forward into the limelight. It's in terms of the employment prospects that are on offer, not just for the pick and so the drivers and the guys in the warehouse, but it's also the grey matter in the office looking after the the logistics of the whole operation. You know, so it's not just two guys in a warehouse. It's a major employer. And if Boris wants to get Britain building again, he should start looking at sheds.
Well, on that note, I mean, you and I have, how shall I put this politely to us both? We've been doing this job for a few years. If you had a sort of a word for the listeners, what would you say was the key thing in terms of generating the circumstances you've been telling us about today?
Well, if we're looking at about the major drivers behind the industrial sector at the minute, and what's resulted in those take-up figures, there's a pent-up demand there after being locked down for a period. There's an element there of stockpiling, you know, in case of Brexit and friction of borders, all that kind of stuff. If you couple that with stockpiling for risk of a second spike, which is, you know, hopefully not around on the horizon, but one never knows. So, you know, there's an awful lot of that going on. But the fundamental point is the exponential rise of e-commerce, and that has been the principal driver. You know, some people have said there's been 5 years growth in e-commerce activity in the last 6 months. And if you look at, so that's change that was happening over a period of time, but it's just been really accelerated in the over the last period. And if you just look at, you know, figures, if you like, again, it's stats. Anyone can make these figures up, but you know, we should be able to rely on the Office of National Statistics, and their figures from June show that in terms of people buying online, so saturation of individuals making purchases online, that's grown from 53% of the population in 2008 to 87% in 2020. Mm-hmm. Now, just to give you an idea of what that means in monetary terms, Clive, the value of internet sales, internet retail sales, in January 2016, they were £800 million. In August 2019, they were 1.3 billion. And in June of this year, they accounted for 2.34 billion.
Yeah.
So
big numbers.
If internet, well, huge numbers, and you know, partly to the detriment of high street retail, but all of that stock being shifted into people's houses, I've got to go through a warehouse. Yeah. And as the growth in online retail continues, so will the growth in industrial demand.
Certainly, I mean, in my career, I've always found it's the case with client business. You know, when one door closes, another door opens. So it sounds as if a cavernous warehouse door's opened for you. Your business.
Well, I wish I was on the end of all these deals, but it is. I mean, the industrial sector is going great guns at the minute, and long may it continue. But these are uncertain times.
Sure. Yeah. Sure. Well, thanks very much for your insight today, Tony. It's been very interesting, and I'm really grateful for the time you've taken, and look forward to doing many more deals with you, and your business do many more deals.
That's great, Clive. Thank you very much, and I can't wait to see you again rocking it out with the at Wakestock.
I'll do my best in my other life as a musician. Okay, take care, Tony.
All right, thank you, Clive.
Bye.
Thanks.
Bye.
Bye.